Good afternoon and welcome in the aula of Maastricht University. Today, Dr. Lorenzo Moroni will give his inaugural lecture in the context of his appointment as Professor of Biofabrication for Regenerative Medicine, a professorship in the Faculty of Health Medicine and Life Sciences, and associated with the Merlin Research Institute, which is one of our new initiatives here in Maastricht. Lorenzo Moroni was born in Milan, and he was born in Milan 40 years ago, so he's as old as its university, if I may tell the secret. Then, after his studies, he moved early on to the Netherlands, to Enschede, where he was a PhD student at the University of Twente. And then, after he finished his PhD in 2007, he moved away from the Netherlands, first to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, then to the University of Bologna, where he has worked in an orthopedic research institute. But obviously, he found a special liking in the Netherlands, and then he came back in 2010 to the Netherlands, to the University of Twente, and where he first started as an assistant professor, then an associate professor, and then I guess this idea came to him that it's also good to move again a bit further south. Not exactly to the Italy, but he came to Maastricht together with a group of colleagues, Clemens van Blitterswijk, Pamela Habibovich-Janebo, and others to build up here this new institute. And in this context, this professorship will be placed. So I would like to ask you now to give us your insights on the theme tempo, and tempo is important for a lecture. Timing and metamorphosis in biofabrication. Dr. Moroni.
Geachte leden van de Raad van Bestuur en van de Raad van Toezicht, dear colleagues, friends and family. Tempo is indeed important for the lecture, so we'll see how that goes. Nature is full of events where changes in time and space dictate functionality. And in fact, although metamorphosis and timing has been known in literature by the Sellemer novel by Franz Kafka as actually a dreadful event, changing or transforming, I shall say, a man into a worm, I actually would like to talk to you about the concept of metamorphosis as an event in nature transforming matter into a new form of life. There are many different examples in nature of that. Probably one of the simplest is the change state, the physical change state of water into ice, which provides the same chemical compound with actually totally new properties. But think also about a worm itself, fabricating for itself a womb to become a butterfly, or even ourselves. We go throughout our lifetime a number of different changes, phases, and adaptations, thanks to the experiences that we make and the environment that we are surrounded with. At bigger time scales, think about our universe. Let us consider, for example, a supernova, which is a star that is going towards the end of its lifetime. Through its explosion, a very high energy is generated, which actually results in the creation of all the different elements that are today part of our nature, including actually the elements forming ourselves. Or consider again a black hole, normally considered actually as an event of death. More and more studies today look at black holes as a possible event where, thanks to the high gravitational forces that are generated by it, elements and matters come together and implode. And actually from that implosion, it is hypothesized that new stars and galaxies can be formed. Metamorphosis and timing are concepts that are not only important to natural sciences, but also to many other disciplines. Let us consider art, for example. Metamorphosis has been central in the artistic work of one of my personal Dutch favorite artists, Maurits Escher, a genius in my humble mind, who has been also a true example of internationality, which is so important also for this community. The metamorphosis concept of Escher builds up on mathematical and geometrical repetitive motifs. And with his work, with his engravings, actually, Escher was also inspired to many other scientists in the field, among which mathematicians, crystallographers, as well as physicists. Metamorphosis number 2 is actually one of the finest examples of his work, where, again, these geometrical and mathematical repetitive models fuse together to create new forms of life, which again fuse together to remind him actually some of his past memory of the life that he spent in Italy by a coincidence. Mostly allegorical, yet another piece of work that, in my opinion, is somewhat metamorphic and yet timeless for its high character of symbolism, is the work of Hieronymus, or actually Jeroen van Aken, or as many of you know him, Hieronymus Bosch. Bosch actually had to bring in a lot of creativity to give their symbols the meanings that they have. That was also due to or thanks to the lack of schemes that he didn't have to follow. Lack of schemes actually that I find particularly important also in science, and I will talk briefly about later on in my talk today. The Garden of Earthly Delights is probably the climax of such a symbolic work, where metamorphosis already appears since the very beginning, as the painting opens up from its closest version, representing the creation of the world, to reveal actually the triptych that represents different phases of our life. Going from the left to the right side of the triptych, we move actually from creation of life to the end of life. And it is so that joyful elements such as the heart or the light of a lantern are transformed into less joyful elements, such as a terrific instrument of torture or a static piece of furniture, to symbolize the danger that we may incur into if we fall into temptation. Again, something that was quite influential at that time when Bosch lived. Bosch also was an inspirer to many other artists of that time. He actually left a sort of legacy, certainly of the Dutch Peter Bruegel the Elder, but as well again of an Italian fantastic artist called Giuseppe Arcimboldo, with which fantastic portraits actually he sapiently fused elements again from the nature, vegetables in this case, with men's traits. But it is one of the most eclectic and genial artists, Italian artists again, of those time that also is supposed to have worked a lot with metamorphosis. Now, rumors conjecture that one of the work pieces of Leonardo that dealt a lot with metamorphosis is actually one of his masterpieces, La Mona Lisa, where actually the metamorphosis concepts are in the supposedly transfiguration of the main character from himself. I shall remind myself that we are scientists, so we do not listen too much to rumors or conjectures, but to real facts. And so in that case, it is much more documented in his history that he worked a lot in terms of metamorphosis with his studies of anatomical sciences, which culminated with the creation of the Vitruvian Man drawing, which was also the basis of many drawings of tools and technologies at that time that were actually in a way enabling or thought to be enabling for human beings, such as probably the very first form of flight. Time and metamorphosis are also important for human beings and as they develop. And again, as I said at the beginning, we go through a number of different phase changes, and through that, through the experiences that we make, we become essentially new persons after having metabolized and reflected on those experiences we make. And so this concept of remembering the past or our past experiences to shape and influence our future is actually a concept that dates back well in time, since the Romans' time, who brought this to the extreme by deifying the spirits of their ancestors. Romans would always ask their ancestors for an advice for their future actions. The lares, as they are called in Latin, would be represented practically as little statues that were placed in sacred places at home and would give an advice to Romans for their family business, public activities, as well as during their travels. And so this concept of remembering history to shape our future is also central for a community, such as the community here at Maastricht University, as well as for our new institute, the Merlin Institute, which is a new institute, or relatively new institute here in Maastricht, which still has deep roots in our past time. With that, actually, I would like to bring you to a sort of time ship journey back to the 80s, where at that time I was a kid, romantically in love with astrophysics. I actually wanted to become an astronaut, which for obvious reasons was not very much possible. I diverged then into medicine. I wanted actually to become a cardiac surgeon, and as one of my closest uncles, to then land back on Earth with my training on biomedical engineering. At the same time, actually one of the very first group in the world was created in Leiden, setting actually the roots of what Merlin is today. This was a group actually which was formed by Professor Klaas de Groot, Clemens van Blitterswijk, and Jos de Wijn, who actually represent also a first example of the added value of true interdisciplinarity, where a biologist, a chemist, and a material scientist join forces together, giving to the society landmarks development for that time. One of the first middle ear bone ossicle regeneration device, today actually replenished by scaffold-free and scaffold-based biofabrication approaches. A plasma coating technology, today used in an uncountable amount of medical implants, and a new biodegradable material platform, today actually living a sort of renaissance. Now, 30 years back in the future, I would like also to offer you my vision on the field of biofabrication. Well, actually, if we really want to achieve the ultimate goal of biofabrication, which will be in the regenerative medicine field, that of printing an organ, we really need to work on a few different elements. We need to understand much better the morphogenetic biological processes at the base of tissue and organ development. Some of us tend also to say that we will need to create a sort of cellular atlas. Whether that is really needed or good foundations with our basic understanding of human developmental biology is sufficient is too early to say. Nonetheless, this much deeper biological understanding will need to be associated also with the development of new technologies. New technologies that will enable us to achieve a much better biomimicry, or a much better resemblance of how our tissues and organs are organized in our body. Now, these hardcore advances will actually bring with them a number of ethical dilemmas. Will we ever be able to make it better than nature? Where is the limit? Are we even going one day to print a human being? What is the connection with the religion, for example? And even if when technologically speaking, we are going to achieve the possibility of printing a human being, are we really going to do that? And provocatively speaking, what about our soul? Are we even going to print our soul? Now, whereas obviously the last question is provocative and rhetorical, I feel also too small to answer by myself all the other questions that I posed just now. But I think this is an important thing that the community will have to do, giving actually guidelines to the young ones and to us as well, in terms of what is possible and realistically acceptable with these kind of technologies. The biofabrication community itself as being one of the youngest one, will probably have to seek collaboration with many other sister communities, such as the European Society of Biomaterials or the Tissue Engineering and Regenerative Medicine community. In achieving, or in the path achieving actually this ultimate goal of organ printing, we will have to work cohesively together by respecting each other's expertise, by respecting each other's initiatives, to actually make something that, if successful, will live much longer than our own egos or than any possible paper that we may be able to write about it. From Leiden, these trio of formidable scientists moved to Bilthoven, where they actually founded one of the first tissue engineering companies in the world, the largest in Europe, called Isotis. This was also the time where Jan de Boer and Pamela Bibovic joined this formidable team. Jan building his group with his molecular biology expertise, and Pamela starting to study the phenomena at the base of osteoinductive biomaterials. I joined this stimulating environment in 2003, as you can see, not with a bike, but with a with a motorized one, as a PhD student under the guidance of Clemens van Blitterswijk and Joost de Wijn. As a PhD student, I was also witnessed a very stimulating environment where not only science, but also a number of spin-off companies were formed, some of which, like Celcotech or Progenics today, live actually in very solid, with very solid foundations. An imprinted actually that was quite fundamental for a young scientist like me at that time, which actually left a little bit of a sign for the years to come. This was not only the place where a number of leaders of the Moroni Institute were formed, but also where a number of leaders in the biofabrication community received their doctorate training, such as Jos Malda and Tim Woodfield. A little bit less in the future, now in 10 to 15 years from now, if we really want to achieve that deeper knowledge on the morphogenetic biological processes at the base of tissue and organ development, we will have to create much more complex 3D in vitro models representing much more closely our organs in our body. We are not flat. We should dare to move away from two-dimensional culture systems that do not represent actually how our body has developed. So if it is true that this 3D in vitro model system could in a way better mimic how we have been developing, or how parts of our body have been developing, if it is true that we are so complex forms of life, we should also dare to abandon more conservative and conventional approaches such as 2D cultures and adopt more and more 3D culture technology. This is what we have started to move some baby steps into that direction, together with a number of different groups in the world, where, for example, today 3D printed scaffolds are not only used as housing for cells for regenerative medicine applications, but also as systems to study, for example, stem cell biology. Or where biofabricated platforms that were originally thought to actually regenerate peripheral nerves are nowadays used as platforms to study neural biology. At a broader level, we participated also with a number of other European groups to revive the concept of the human on a bioreactor, in contrast with the human on a chip, which is so popular today, where we would like actually to maintain the same simplicity and functionality of the latter platform without oversimplifying the complexity again of how different biological systems in our body are connected together. From Bilthoven, the group moved to Enschede at Twente University, where Joost and the class enjoyed a well-deserved retirement. I have to say I learned a lot from these two gentlemen. Science is passion, and when combined with past and new knowledge, it can really leave a sign to our society. Science is not a game. It's actually rigorous, but it can be done with a lot of fun. And when you do that, it becomes timeless and meaningful with your contribution. Now, in Enschede, we were also joined by Roman Druckenmüller. We built expertise on microfabrication, which were also central to inspire actually the paradigm shift in the concept of biomaterials, where screening platforms were central or were developed. This was also important to inspire the creation of new spin-off companies such as Materiomics and Scrivo. Even a little bit less in the future, if we look now in what is needed for really achieving that ultimate goal of biofabrication of printing organs, in 5 to 10 years from now, we will have to make dynamic biomaterials. And think about it. All the biomaterials that we have in our body are dynamic. They all change, they always change every day that we live through the metabolic reaction that happen. And so in this endeavor, actually, I hope that, again, with the collaboration on the technological side of Roman Druckenmüller and on the chemistry side of Matthew Baker, we will be able to bring in balance the advantages of the natural and synthetic polymer systems to really create a platform of biomaterials that can actually solve a specific function of what cells normally do every day. And by actually adopting a combinatorial approach, we could create biomaterials that can actually solve all those functions that cells perform on a daily basis. And in doing that, we should also be careful that we put everything in balance by balancing actually the bioactivity that we would give to our biomaterials with the capacity of our engineered tissue to maintain their equilibrium, or in other words, to maintain in a homeostasis state. From Enschede, we finally moved to Maastricht. This was a somewhat logical move because Maastricht actually also was and is at the center of an ecosystem together with the close by academic hospital as well as the Brightlands campuses to actually create new therapies that will actually reach the clinics through valorization. This was also the moment actually to rethink also some strategic directions as well as to empower the Institute with new faculty bringing in complementary expertise. And again, within the spirit of the local ecosystem, Merlin was created to enhance collaboration not only among the different groups at Merlin, but also with the different local and international parties, bringing in also the past collaborator networks that we formed until that time. Which brings me to talk to you about the science of tomorrow, which has radical roots in the science of today. Especially in the Netherlands, the example of public-private partnerships has been a very successful example where each party in these partnerships know actually its role in a sort of mechanism of our clocks. And doing that, we actually, as a whole, can indeed really create something that can change the healthcare system of tomorrow. This is what we hope will happen with public-private partnerships that we have created here locally, together with the Brightlands Materials Center, creating a first program on 3D printing for biomedical applications, where we want to study, on one hand, the fundamental aspect of different 3D printing technologies, and by learning from these fundamental aspects, actually synthesize new bioactive biomaterials that will be applied in a number of different applications, spanning from skeletal to cardiac and soft organ tissues. This also was at the base of a European consortium, FAST, who actually aim to achieve new 3D printing technologies for better bone regenerative approaches. Yet, without the oil of fundamental science, the engine of public-private partnership will not be able to run. So I was lucky enough a couple of years ago to obtain a ERC grant, which allows my lab to work on for more fundamental science, where actually the central question of this fundamental science is relatively simple, but the answer probably will be more complex than the question. how can we engineer a biomaterial that actually can maintain or can self-sustain tissues? The answer that I gave, or the answer that I hope I can give in another 3 years from now, is that this should happen by controlling in space and time at different scales the biological and physical signals that we actually deliver with our biomaterials to the cells. Now imagine, to give it a bit more of a practical touch, a situation where you had been in the right location at the wrong moment, or in the wrong location at the wrong moment. I'm sure you will agree with me that arriving at the airport when your flight just departed, or arriving at your car when the policeman is giving you a ticket because you have parked the car in the wrong spot, there was a no parking zone, would be two good examples of these two kind of scenarios. And so is actually the same in our body, where if we would not be able to deliver signals in the right time and space scale, we may actually have a healed broken bone still resulting into a non-functional limb, or the formation of cysts, which are mass of cells that are growing in an uncontrolled time scale in the wrong space. Now in cell hybrid, what we would like to do is to create a sort of multi-layered scaffold. If you are familiar with the Russian dolls called matryoshka, a sort of box in a box in a box system, or if you like another parallel, a sort of garlic, or I should better say onion scaffold, where different layers will be deputed to different specific cellular functions, moving from the nanoscale to the macro scale, ultimately aiming to regenerate osteochondral defects. And so by running quickly through the history of Merlin and my personal vision on biofabrication, I also played a little bit of an experiment with all of you by going back and forth in time in a reverse manner. So if we look at the evolution of biofabrication, whereas today we are able to create small-scale tissues for regenerative medicine, drug discovery, and toxicity testing, in 4 to 5 years from now, we should be able to bring to the clinics simple tissues for yet more complex applications, such as cardiac patches or vascular and neural grafts, whereas in 10 to 15 years from now, we should be able to regenerate functional units of organs, and in 20 to 30 years from now, I really hope we will be able to regenerate full organs. This is what I strive for my group to work on, combining technology with material science and organ regeneration. We would like to move away from the dogma that every tissue in our body is homogeneous, and in fact replicate the heterogeneity and the different properties that tissues have in space in our body, or in other words, their anisotropicity. And we would like to do that by taking inspiration from a more biological system perspective, not only regenerating those tissue element building blocks, but also connecting them with the neurovascular tree, as well as with the lymphatic network and the immune system surrounding those tissue elements. And this, I hope, will give us those more complex 3D in vitro models that will enable us to study the morphogenetic biological processes that I was talking at the beginning, ultimately for the successful achievement of organ regeneration. Now I would like to introduce you my group at Merlin, a group that I recently call Group of Superheroes, as recently inspired by a cover from Nature, which again, for the first time for this journal, clearly indicated the importance of interdisciplinarity. Now guys, being a superhero is not easy, so to you I say, play hard, and yet always keep listening to the voice of the kid inside yourself, as Giovanni Pascoli, one of the most famous poets of the 19th century in Italy, used to say in his poetry. Balance eureka moments with a dreaming vision in your daily life, and yet a critical outlook to the data that you generate in your lab. And in doing that, few examples in history consist of Paul Klee, for example, in the artistic world, who actually took inspiration by watching at microscopy slides to make his painting, or like Poincaré, who actually used to solve his mathematical conjectures in daydreaming moments during his lifetime, or again Watson, who discovered the DNA structure by actually making hypotheses that were originally seemed illogical in terms of symmetry. And yet intuitions are the essence of science, like Archimedes, who actually discovered the buoyancy bodies principle after just making a bath himself. Now the story goes that Archimedes, because of the excitement of this discovery, also forgot to put on his clothes and walked naked in the streets of Syracuse in Sicily. Now, I certainly do not want to see you running naked in the corridors of Maastricht University, nor of Maastricht, but I do want you to keep that excitement and joy of making your discoveries. And in pursuing for your next discovery, do not be afraid to fail in your experiments. Failed experiments are so important, they are so informative. Like, for example, Faraday, who was put on working by his supervisor, Sir Humphrey Davy, on understanding the properties of glasses, but failed in his assignment. When later he was working on the connection between electromagnetic fields and light waves, a piece of glass that he maintained during his assignment time became crucial for his discovery. In fact, he observed that light is not affected by magnets when moving in air, not when moving in any other gases, not when moving in any liquids or in many, many different solids. In glass, it was affected. And so this actually led him to then theorize the connection between relativity and electromagnetism, and to discover the unity between electricity, magnetic fields, and light. In short, to you, I ask to dream big, to get things done, and to have fun while doing them. And this actually is a personal recipe that I would like to extend to the whole Merlin, to whom actually I would like also to wish and to ask to keep pushing the boundary of our science, like Janus, who at the Roman times was the gatekeepers of Roman lives. I would wish that we will be the gatekeepers of regenerative medicine science. Janus is also a symbol of a new beginning. So with that, I also hope that with Jan, we will continue to work on 3D cell culture system, combine them with screening platforms to perhaps also discover new biological pathways that are not at all thought to be activated in three-dimensional cultures. And with Pamela, I hope that we will continue to work on structuring inorganic materials to discover new properties of that matter. And with Roman, I would like to continue developing new bottom-up approaches for different regenerative medicine applications. And yet, in these well-established collaborations within Merlin, I also hope to find more and more opportunities for collaborations with our younger faculty, to whom I also take the freedom to give a little advice based also on my own past, sometimes restless experience as a scientist. Balance your ambitions with the capacity, the wisdom to wait for the right time, and build up momentum to achieve that right time. Now, Janus could also be a symbol for a gatekeeper for Maastricht University within the local and national system, with the ecosystem that has already happened in this region to bring clinical therapies to the patients via the markets. And here I have actually already met a number of energetic clinical collaborators with whom I'm sure that we are going to bring some applications to the clinics. But it is actually somebody from outside Maastricht that I first would like to acknowledge when thinking about clinical collaborators. And that's Joris Rotmans from Leiden University Medical Centrum. In a lifetime of a scientist, there are many collaborators that come and go, and only a handful that come and stay. Now, Joris is certainly belonging to that last category. With you, Joris, I hope that we will continue to work at the unison as we have done in the past 5 years, trying to our best to bring new therapies for the better welcome of dialytic patients, and who knows what the future will reserve to us more. At Maastricht, I would like to acknowledge Peter Emans and Chris Arts from the orthopedic department, with whom we are bringing 3D printed scaffolds for osteochondral regeneration to the clinics. Peter Kessler at the craniomaxillofacial department, with whom we are working on complex bone regeneration applications for, again, through 3D printing applications. Sandro Gelsomino at the cardiothoracic surgery department, with whom we are exploring different strategies for cardiac repair. Stephen Oldedamink and Jeroen Koman at the general surgery department, with whom we are moving the first steps towards organ printing and discussing about different possibility in the gastroenterology system. And finally, René van der Hulst at the plastic surgery department, with whom we are discussing about breast regeneration applications after cancer resection. And this brings me to the end of my lecture, where I would also like to express my gratitude to the organization, Maastricht University, for having believed in my capabilities, and ask for a small request. Simplify. Simplify processes, simplify procedures, and simplify implementation. Merlin is a continuously increasing community of highly ambitious scientists who came from the most disparate part of the world to actually give our contribution to science. For doing that, we have left our home, we made of Maastricht our home, and yet without forgetting our friends, family, and traditions. For having done that, we carry a lot of motivation, and it will be a tremendous shot of energy from the organization back to us if we would be able to actually steer that into more efficient science. It would be a tremendous shot of energy from us back to the organization for helping towards its growth. Ik heb gezegd.
Thank you, Professor Moroni, for this excellent lecture. It ended a bit abrupt. I was awaiting another movie, I should say. But you showed us a lot in this 40 minutes. The topic was metamorphosis and time, and you kept your time. Thank you very much. Metamorphosis of cells, tissues, but also metamorphosis of personal careers and how we develop as scientists and how we move to different places, to different topics. And of course, being as young as the university, this voyage hasn't ended. So on behalf of the executive board of Maastricht University and the board of the Maastricht University Medical Center, we wish you much success, both personally but also professionally, that Merlin will unfold further magic, it's already in the name, to really transform us. Because also universities and scientific institutions go through metamorphosis. This university certainly has. Being built 40 years ago, we are now in a phase where we see the retirement of many people who have built this university. And it's very privileged. We're very privileged that we see new people coming, joining us from all over the place to lead us into the future. You're one of these people, and fortunately you're embedded very well in a fantastic institute, Merlin, that is part of one of the initiatives that we have established here together with our friends. Limburg invests in knowledge economy, so it's a really a broader idea how we can ourselves go into a metamorphosis to reach new frontiers as an institution. What I particularly like, that we do this not only in a sort of solitude, that these activities are carried on with crossovers from basic scientists to clinician in what we call translational medicine, but also crossovers with other institutions in this country and beyond to form strong networks and put this really as a Dutch initiative, as a Dutch-Flemish initiative, if we talk about regenerative medicine initiatives in the broader sense on the map. So there's many things to do, and maybe sometime at the reception you can tell me why a Vespa never can be faster than a bicycle. But that's the challenge for the future, also in science. Thank you very much for coming. Again, we would like to invite you on behalf of Professor Moroni to the reception, which will be today due to the fact that we're not in Italy, not outside, but in the REFTA. And there we can continue not only congratulating you and your family, but also celebrate not only your future, but also this fantastic collaboration that we started. Thank you very much. And please, audience, let Professor Moroni, his family, and the cortege lead the way to the reception. Thank you.